Hello, it's Dr. C, and welcome to another episode of Rethinking Christian Education. And again, the purpose of Rethinking Christian Education is to create a safe space where the members of the Christian education community can come together, learn, and grow together. And so today I'm super duper excited because I have a dear friend of mine now, who many of you know as the guru, the OG of Rethink, the originator of Rethink Church, Reverend LaKesha Womack. So let's give it a hand. Yay!
Thank you for having me on.
Good deal. We're so happy to have you. And so in this brief moment, we really wanted to kind of get your thought about rethinking church and then how it applies to rethinking Christian education. And so tell us, first of all, tell us about this whole idea of rethinking church. Ooh-wee.
Most definitely. So in 2016, I was invited to present for the World Methodist Conference, and it was on using social media for global evangelism and outreach. And I had an epiphany that for the first time in the history of civilization, we could fulfill the Great Commission without having to travel all over the world. So imagine, like, I'm excited, I'm ready to go back to churches. I'm like, hey, and they're just like, nah, like, we don't want to be on the we don't want to use Facebook. We don't want websites. We don't need to be online. People need to come to the church. And I was like, oh, really? And at that time, T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen, like I was watching like these television ministries and these digital ministries pick up. And you couldn't tell people that they were not a member of T.D. Jakes' church. Like they were watching online, they're giving, they feel like they're a part of it. And it's like, well, these churches are growing really fast using this digital media. And we're kind of not growing at all with this mindset about people need to come to us. So maybe we need to look at it. And then the pandemic hit and everybody was like, hey, remember that website we were talking about? Like, how can I go Facebook Live? And so we started building the community around Rethinking Church during the pandemic.
Good deal. Good deal. Hey, well, that opens up a lot of conversation. As I am, you two are from one of the traditional legs of the church. Share that with us as well. Your ordination and.
Yeah, so I actually started out with young adult ministry. I was going to church with my mom. I wasn't saved at the time. I was a new mom, and my mom is a Christian education director, and I was going with her for the food. Like I tell everybody, like I would go to afternoon services because I knew there was going to be fried chicken. Somebody's grandma baked a pound cake, and I was going to get fed. So, but the more I went, the more I saw that there were like no young adults who were really like involved and engaged, and so. Some of my friends kind of challenged me like, well, why don't you get involved? And from there, I became the South Central Regional Chairperson for the Young Adults in Christian Ministries for the AME Zion Church, served there for 4 years. Then I became the Connectional Chairperson, did that for 4 years, developed a lot of ecumenical relationships. And one of the things that I saw is like the problems we were having in Zion, like everybody's having those problems. Like people were like, oh, I'm leaving. I'm like, well, where are you going? Because we're all struggling. We just have like slightly different struggles. But and then, one day my pastor was like, hey, I want you to come speak at my church. And I was like, okay. And I was in my mom's living room and I'm pacing. I'm like, all right, God, like I just need like an ounce of the Holy Spirit. Like, I don't want to be up there shouting or anything, but like, just give me enough so that I know that it's real. And ever since then, like I've been sold out. I tell people like, you don't need a whole lot. Like if God just like drop a drop in your spirit, then it'll change your life. And I've been changed ever since.
Wow. Amen. Amen. So listen, you mentioned earlier about these opportunities for the church to do things differently and the pushback, the side-eyed that you received. Tell us your perspective on this whole idea of not just rethinking church, but more specifically, rethinking Christian education. What's the urgency of rethinking Christian education?
Yeah, I think it's urgent because there are people who are really seeking tools and resources to live like Christ, to be disciples. So one of the things that, really perplexed me in our denomination, like we would always say, like, we're making disciples, we're making disciples. And so I would be like, well, how? Like, what is the process? Like, how do you do that work? And a lot of churches could not articulate what the process was to make a disciple. They could tell me how they were making members, like we have new members class, and we teach people, and we walk through the discipline, and I'm like, yeah, but how is it that you're walking with people so that they truly become disciples of Christ? And I think that when we see the disconnect with people not wanting to come to church, because I've heard people, say, well, people go to Walmart and they go to football games, why can't they come to church? And it's like, because you're obviously not meeting a need that they have. And when people look to the church, like they're looking for, the strategies, like, how do I live like Christ? And when they come to your church and they see fish fries and you got missionary teas and you got hat shows and you're doing everything but showing me how to become a disciple, then the ownership is not on me to keep doing what is not what I'm looking for. It's on you to figure out, how do I give people what they're looking for? And hint, people, when they come to the church, like they're looking for Christ. They're looking for, how do I become like Christ? Like, the rainbow teas and all that stuff is how we fellowship. But the crux of your program should be, how do I help people become more like Christ? And I think that if churches want to survive during the pandemic, post-pandemic, at any point, we have to make sure that we're keeping the main thing, and that's helping people become like Christ.
Wow. So, you have my head like, because again, what you're sharing with us is it's what we've been doing. And, as I've said on other broadcasts, that the pandemic, whether it's COVID, whether it's the financial unrest, whether it's the social injustice, the pandemonia has put the church on blast, right? And it says, it made us turn the mirror back and say, what are we actually doing? And you mentioned the Great Commission, but if we look at what the Great Commission is versus what we're doing,
right?
Is there a gap? Are we on the map at all? And I do believe that the world, who's still looking to the church for direction and the answers, is saying in response, wait, I thought you were supposed to.
Right.
So do you think that the church, especially Christian education, do you think we get it? Do you think we understand it, that what's going on, or what we're now being challenged to do? Or are we in a hurry to go back and do what we were doing before the pandemonium set in?
Oh, we're in a hurry to go back. Like, when I look at like your 3-prong approach, like we're heavy on programming. Like everybody wants to have a program. Everybody wants to do a program. But my question becomes, and this revelation came to me when I became a member of the 100 Black Women. And they said, we're not a service organization, we're an advocacy organization. And all of our projects have an impact. And it broke my heart, because I was like, did anybody think about the impact they were having when they did all these programs that I've been going to all my life? Like, we don't begin with the end in mind. Like, we're not thinking like, all right, this is the impact that I want to have. This is the change that we're working toward in people's lives. It's like, all right, we're doing our 100, men and women in Black and white. And it's like, yeah, I understand you got to raise money, but what impact are you trying to have? We said we want to have like a CED Saturday. Like, okay, but what's the impact? Like, what is the end goal that we're trying to do? So there's a lot of programming, but not necessarily like that teaching model. Like, what is it that I'm trying to teach in this program? And then how does that lead to discipleship? And when we do those parts, then people come back to the program. But so often we stay at that program level and people get burnt out because they're like, I'm not learning anything, I'm not growing, so why should I keep coming back to the program? And that's why we have the same people coming to the same things and nobody's changing.
Wow. Wow. So thank you for sharing that, especially with the piece about the three prong. Thank you.
I'm a fan of the show. What can I say?
I got you. And I really appreciate that. But so you mentioned impact, and wow. So for many people know that I'm a dean of education. I produce teachers, right? And so if you think about it, I likened our parallel discipleship development to teacher ed or teacher preparation, right? And in that world, the whole idea is for teachers or educators to be trained to such a level of competency that they go out and make an impact on children or in classrooms or in educational settings. When it comes to impact of the church through Christian education, what is the impact that we are supposed to be making? What is that impact that we're supposed to be making in the world?
So I think the impact that we should be working toward is like people wanting to live a changed life. So, like I've gone in churches where, I've heard people say, well, I've been like this for 30 years and I ain't changing. That's a problem. Like if we're not teaching people like, why they should become more like Christ. Like I've even had people say, we're doing an empathy as a second language training. And I'm like, if you're a Christian and empathy isn't your first language, like that's a discipleship problem. Like, a lot of the problems that we have in the church are discipleship issues. Like when, people don't want to tithe, when people don't want to serve, when people, are all about themselves or there's chaos in the church, like all of that comes back to discipleship. Because if you've trained me to become a disciple, if you've really taught me and it's in my heart to be like Christ, then I do want to give. I do want to serve. I'm not keeping up mess because it's in my heart. Like even when I want to do the wrong thing, like there's something on the inside of me that compels me to be my better self. But when you have a bunch of people who just don't care about being their better selves, that's a discipleship issue, which means that we haven't taught them and we haven't provided the guidance on like how does your inner man change. And if your inner man is staying the same like 10, 20, 30 years, like that's a problem. Right? Like there's no impact. Like you're just volunteers of a nonprofit doing fundraising. And that's what most of our churches are, because we're not focusing on and for all of you, like that doesn't mean that you have to change people. Like we can't change people. But what we do is we walk with people, we teach them, we talk with them, we help them get the resources that they need to overcome the trauma that they've dealt with so that they can start to develop that personal relationship with Christ that allows them to accept him as their Lord and Savior. If your work isn't centered around that, then what are you doing? You are nonprofit doing fundraising with a bunch of volunteers.
Right. Wait. You didn't say a nonprofit with a bunch of volunteers, did you?
Don't forget the fundraising because we're heavy on the fundraising.
Right. And it reminds me of a book I can't remember right off. I think and I don't want to misquote it. But the author calls the church a country club. Called the church a country club, right? So I get it, and I hope our listeners are getting this. This is as the old church say, you're talking good right now. But listen, so back to me being a dean of teacher education. So when we teach these competencies, and they go out into the world, and we look at what we've done, we want to see some evidence of their impact, right? Yeah. And you spoke a lot on evidence, impact of the church, but give me an idea of, or give our listeners an idea of what's that evidence that says we are doing the right thing or we need to rethink what we're doing. What's some evidence?
Yeah, and I think for me, the evidence looks like people using their spiritual gifts to serve God. And so, one of the things that we should be doing during this whole discipleship process is helping people to identify, like, what is the call that God has placed on your life? So one of the things that we have a tendency to do in the church is because we need a Christian education director, and you work in the school system, so you're the Christian education director, and you're a young person, so you're over the young adult ministry, without, really taking the time to, one, make sure that this person is discipled, because we have a lot of people in leadership who are not discipled. And so if your church is like chaotic and everything's a mess and people are always bickering, again, that's a discipleship issue. But when you take the time to disciple your members and not rush them into leadership, not rush them into positions, but allowing them to figure out, like, what is God calling me to do? And then working with them to figure out, like, all right, the vision of our church and the mission of our church is X, Y, and Z. And based on the call that you have, these are some areas that we believe that you can serve. And so when you start to see people getting connected and people being plugged in, and they're actually using their gifts to further the mission and vision of your church, you're starting to have impact. And guess what? You're not having to compel people. You're not having to make them come to the program. You're not having to make people give, because it's on the inside. And too often we want the outward show. We want people to show up. We want people to give. We want people to do the things without them becoming.
Wow. I just had to take a breather on that one. Wow. So there is an opportunity for us to have solid, concrete evidence of our impact, and we don't have to write it and put it on billboards. It shows if we're making an impact, right? Right.
Yeah. And that's what the best part of this is. This type of impact does not cost money. Like one of the things that people are like, we gotta have money and we gotta do this. But if you're truly like about relationship building could be, let's meet in the fellowship hall and have like coffee. Let's meet at Starbucks and I'll buy you a coffee. Let's talk through the issues that you're dealing with. Let's connect you with the resources. Let's figure out, what is that obstacle that's stopping you from getting to the next level in your spiritual journey. That doesn't cost money. But all the fish fries and the Zumba and all this stuff, that's what costs money. That's where people are so caught up that we don't have the money to do ministry, when really it's you don't have the money to do the programs.
Ooh, ouch, ouch. ouch, 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 ouch. Wow. Well, so I'm thinking about when Jesus Christ ascends, he's given the disciples their last marching orders to go make disciples, right? Fast forward to Acts, he descends, right, or shows up, and he finds them sort of just standing there, doing nothing. They've been given the assignment, but they're not doing anything, right? And so if you think about it, the church is that group of disciples just standing there. They've been given the assignment, and we've been preaching it for generations now, but the evidence points to the fact that somebody stopped doing what they should have been doing. And so with that in mind, keep in mind that we're in the middle of a pandemonium. We still haven't taken care of COVID. We still haven't taken care of economics. We still haven't taken care of social injustice. There are some new needs. There are some new expectations that the church, the community needs from the church. Those that did go back to the church have new experiences they need to have addressed. What would you say the church needs to now focus on that we may have not been focusing on prior to the pandemonium? What should we be doing now as a result of these new needs, these new expectations of the church from its members and community?
So I think that every church needs to do an inventory of who your members are, because I've worked with some churches that are in affluent communities, and their members have resources, so they don't have the same needs as a church that might be in an inner city, and people are struggling to make ends meet. So I think that every church needs to do kind of an internal assessment to figure out what are the needs of your people. And once you figure out what the needs of your people are, now step outside the doors of your church and figure out what are the needs of your community. What are the needs of the people around you? And one of the issues that I see is a lot of times the church will want to step outside and meet the needs of the community when the people inside the church are still hungry. So you're trying to do, a food pantry when you have people inside your church who are still hungry. You're trying to help the homeless when you have people inside your church who are facing eviction. So too often we're not meeting the needs of the people we already have, which is why we're doing frangelism. Like invite your friends, your relatives, whoever like the frangelism people are. Because like, if I go to a restaurant and the food is really good, you know what I do? I tell other people, come to my restaurant, come get some of what I've had. If people aren't telling other people to come get some of what you're serving, it's probably because they're not getting fed. And so before you go out trying to feed everybody else, make sure that you're feeding the people that you have. And guess what they do? They tell other people to come.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that when we start looking at like what do we need to focus on feeding the people that you have. Like, if the people that you have aren't fed, you might not need to go Facebook Live. Like if your people are not on Facebook, you don't need to go. Like too many people are not feeding the flock that they already have, and they're trying to reach other people. When you got people who are sitting in your congregation looking malnourished, if you only have 5 people in your congregation and you go live and like 2 people are watching, like your issue is not technology. Your issue is what is it that I'm serving? Because obviously nobody's coming in to get it and nobody's watching to get it.
But help me understand this. What if I, as a church leader or a church member, feel like I'm doing all that I'm supposed to be doing? It's their fault. I mean, they're not coming. They don't want to turn from their wicked ways to hear what the Lord has to say, to come in these doors. What do you say about those congregations?
I think you said it already. Like, where's the fruit? Like, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, there should be some evidence that you're doing it, because we do not serve a God that just puts us out here and we don't see any evidence of what God has asked us to do. So I would say, the best example that I use, and if you guys have ever heard me present before, you've heard this story, but the best evidence is McDonald's. So I'll be 45 in a couple of weeks, and I've loved eating Big Mac since I was a little girl. The Big Mac has not changed. If anything, it's gotten smaller, I think. But for the past 40 years, McDonald's is constantly looking for new ways to make people want the Big Mac. Their marketing is constantly changing. Their advertising is constantly changing. The price is going up, but people are still buying the Big Mac. The Big Mac is the gospel. The gospel does not change, but how we market it, how we present it to people. We have to be looking at, are we presenting it in a way that people are excited to come and get it? There's so many churches where the leaders aren't excited, the members aren't excited. And I'm like, if y'all aren't excited, how do you expect people who come in to be excited? Like, I love what I do, and people get excited because I'm excited about what I do. If I showed up and I was on your show and I'm like, yeah, the church needs to, get more people. And people are like, oh, okay. But if I'm like, yes, like we can get more people, we can go out and make disciples. Excitement is contagious.
Mm-hmm.
But too often it's like, well, we've done all we can do and the people just don't want to come. So if they just need to get themselves together. No, we need to get ourselves together. We need to be in position to make people excited about joining in and being co-laborers with us in this work. That we're walking with them through their messiness and through all the life situations, that they feel like, wow, I found a community that embraces me and loves me, even in my imperfections. And this is where I want to grow so that I can begin producing fruit.
There you go. Good. Wow. I can sit here and just listen to you go on and on and on and on. But I want to make sure that people know how to find you. So tell us what you're doing and how people can find you. Gosh, this is just mind blowing. So go ahead and tell us how to find you and how to get more of this Reverend Womack.
Well, you can look me up. You can Google me, LaKesha Womack. Like, I'm all over like these internet streets. Like, I've been doing branding for the past 15 years. I have 19 books. Several of them are on church related topics. We have our Rethinking Church community. You're more than welcome to become a part of that. We have our summit coming up where Dr. Seymore will be one of our presenters. We have Rethink TV, where we are trying to change the consciousness of the media that we consume. We have our Ministry Matters magazine, which is coming out next month. So we have a lot of stuff for faith-based leaders. Like, our goal is to provide resources, because I'm tired of y'all saying, well, I don't know what to do. You don't know. Come over. We'll show you. We'll give you some advice, because like, that's not an excuse anymore. We can't keep saying we don't know what to do. We don't know how to reach people, because there are too many people like Dr. Seymore and other professionals who are giving you the tools and giving you the resources for you to do something. But you have to first, you got to pray. You got to make sure that you're hearing from God about where you're supposed to be working, because too often, we out here doing what we want to do and wonder why it don't work and why we're always stressed out. Because too often we haven't done the work of praying like, God, show me what you want me to do. Show me who you want me to serve. Show me how you want me to help. And then show me who can help me to do this. Show me who has the resources and the tools. And then we got to invest. We got to invest in the professionals to help us, because there's no such thing as a free lunch, y'all. I know like y'all want to watch like all the webinars, get all the information for free. But at some point, the money that you spend on these evangelists coming in for your revivals, you need to take a little bit of that and invest in some professionals that's going to come in and help your church to grow. Because these revivalists, like, they going back to their church. But when you hire a consultant to come in and train your people, now you have something that's sustainable. And you have some people for these revivalists to come in and preach too, because y'all paying all this money for them to come preach to 10 people. That's a whole other subject. But we got to invest and connect yourself with a community that is rethinking and that wants to grow like you do.
Wow. Well, Reverend LaKesha, as she's commonly known, thank you so much for joining us. I am so pleased to be a part of the Rethink community and the great work that's going on. You are a phenomenal vessel of God, and thank you so much for even being a part of the inspiration for Rethinking Christian Education. And so to those of you that are listening, it's our norms to, I normally say, share it, tag it, like it, make comments. But this time, if I could stand on this table and say, share this, take this back to your pastor, take this back to your director of Christian education, your discipleship leader, anybody that will listen, they need to hear what Reverend LaKesha has said to us tonight. So I'll say it in a calm way. Share, like, make comments, ask questions, but tell them every Monday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, the Rethink Christian Education community, we're talking about how do we look at what work we're doing. Remember, teaching is not that job that's good and sexy, but it's the one that goes most noticed when we haven't done our jobs. Churches, when we have not done our jobs, everybody knows it. So let's do this thing together. Let's work and grow together. So until next time, on behalf of Reverend LaKesha and myself tonight, thank you so much for joining us. Have a blessed week. Bye-bye.